Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Dorian's Mode. I'm your host, Dorian Wallace, and these next series of conversations are called This Machine Kills Fascists. And we're talking to various activists, healers, artists, and people on the street and working people who are trying to build across various platforms and various demographics. And it's a very, very challenging conversation. Um, but today we have Bonita Oliver and DeMarisa Steeley. And Bonita, if you could start us off with the dialogue on what the question is that you're interested about talking today.
Sure thing. Okay. So, yes, very recently, today we're recording this on the 9th of April, but just a few days ago, on the 5th of April, there was a hands-off rally, um, which is kind of like an anti-Trump protest that occurred on April 5th, that was held in multiple cities across the nation. And I was interested in this kind of dialogue that's happening online, uh, where it's highlighting the minimal amount of Black people that took part in those rallies. Now, whether that's true or not, I'm fascinated by the dialogue that is taking place online about why or why not um, Black people would be involved in that particular rally that took place.
That's super interesting. So I was not a part of the rally itself here in New York, but literally walked right past it when it was happening. And there's kind of an interesting story that I can get into later. But the reason myself and my partner did not go is we had our kid with us, and it's very challenging to move around with a 4-year-old in those types of situations. Um, but I'll tell you just from a personal observation, it was a pretty mixed color of people, but it was definitely more white. And this is just from kind of observation and scanning by walking past. But I will say that there were a lot of Black people, specifically Black elders, that were there. I saw groups of Black women, as well as groups of Black men and women, walking around with signs specifically about Social Security and Medicaid and Medicare. So um, that's just kind of the observation of seeing it. Now, I will say it did not appear that there were many Black youth or Black middle folks involved. But again, this is anecdotal.
Yes, I also did not attend on the 5th. I was actually traveling back from Maryland for from an event that I had out in Maryland, and that was my travel day, April 5th. So I missed out on the rallies, but I did on my way to the train station in Maryland. I saw people, even in the days prior, um, already outside with like on bridges on 90 on the highway on 95. In fact, there was a lot of traffic slowdown because people were holding up signs even the day before the 5th, anti-Trump signs. And then when I got back to the city, by the time I got back, it was late in the day. And I think people were winding down from the protest, the rally. But I saw lots of people, traveling on the trains, carrying their signs, leaving the rally. And I will affirm from my vantage point, it did seem to be primarily older people. I'd say like the boomer generation that I saw in passing. And again, I wasn't passing the actual spot where the rally was taking place, which is just who I was noticing, in transit back from the rally on the train, on the street leaving. They were mostly older people. So I found that interesting. But, since I wasn't in attendance, I can't speak to the truth of this narrative that Black people were not involved. But I was highly skeptical of that narrative that I've been hearing online. A lot of the things that I'm hearing online are that, this is one that Black people are choosing to sit out from. And some of the reasons that I've been hearing for Black people sitting out is because people are saying it's because, we already knew that this was going to happen. We did not want to vote Trump into office. We kind of were expecting this, and we did everything we could to prevent this from happening, and we have been also rallying and are continuing to rally for other issues, other matters of importance to our communities and to this country. Continuing to rally, for against, I should say, Medicaid cuts, continuing to rally, against prisons, continuing labor workforce to support, workers' rights, continuing to stand up for people who are being targeted by ICE, for example. So some of the reasons that I've heard for Black people not being involved in this is because Black people are already very involved in continuing to rally in support of other issues. And we're sitting this one out because we already knew what the outcome would be. And so this is your, meaning everybody who is not Black, this is your time to get involved and fix what you kind of voted for. So that's what I've been hearing online. And I was wondering what the two of you thought about that.
I'm super interested, DeMarisa, what your thoughts are. Can't tell if
Are you on mute?
yeah, can't tell if it's a mute thing or if she's not available. Well, I can
Well, what are your
respond
thoughts,
and
Dorian?
yeah, I can respond until we hear from DeMarisa. I mean, narratives like that are confusing sometimes. I think
Yes.
it the worst part of it, I think, erases the Black voices that are involved. I mean, you and I both in our
Yes.
personal observations spoke about seeing elders, like elderly folks participating. And I did see a large amount of Black women specifically uh, from the elders population, boomers, baby boomers. And there's a certain amount of why are they not considered Black people being involved in this movement? And I find
Exactly.
problems. I find problems with that. They're not necessarily speaking for Black lives, though they are absolutely speaking for Black lives. If that resonates with you at all.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the individuals that were there were speaking for. I will say that I've watched some coverage of the rally by Status Coup, and on that particular moment, that was captured, that I saw online, it was actually, I'd say, probably a couple. It was a couple that they interviewed that I caught, and I would actually, they were probably millennials, maybe Gen X, but I'd say older millennials that were there, a Black couple, and they were there because they said, we have to show up for this. We cannot just stand by without pushback about all of the changes and the corruption that's happening in our government. And they, focused on several different issues. But one of them was, Medicaid cuts. I think was one of the things that they highlighted that they were there to stand up for. So, yeah, I think we have to interview individuals that are attending these rallies and these protests to see why they are showing up at these events. And that's something that I'm actually interested in doing, is going to more of these rallies that are happening, to take part, but also to capture more of these marginalized voices, or these voices that are kind of being erased, as you mentioned. Because I think, online and in the mainstream media, we know that it can be very biased. So, it's up to us to make sure that more of the story is told, and straight from the voices directly of people that are in attendance.
Yeah, it can also it can also be just the way that narratives are shaped
Yeah,
sort of by,
I'm sorry,
oh, here
Dorian.
we go.
Dorian,
No, 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 you're good. You're good. Welcome.
Yeah. I was gonna say I did not follow the April 5th hands-off rally stuff. I'm actually not really into politics at all. While I'm not a Trump supporter in any form of fashion, I'm not really ever surprised about the things that he says or does. I kind of feel like he's just a reflection of politics as usual. And I think he just says the things that people don't say but covertly act on historically, in my opinion. Um, and I don't feel like, you know, this is the fight for Black people anyway. It's not like if there were changes made regarding Social Security or Medicare or job security or any of those things, DEI or any of those things, that we would get a better hand in the deal. The systems were faulty before the Trump administration. They were faulty leading all the way back to the civil rights movement. We asked, dating back to segregation, we asked for, integration and equal, and our educational system has never been equal. There's just been other strategies put in place to keep it legally disproportionate. And we see the same thing with the carceral system. So I honestly think we should put our finger up and pardon ourselves and let those that, see themselves as true Americans, let them deal with the nonsense that is Trump and the mockery that he creates of this country, or has created of this country. I'm thinking about sovereignty. I'm thinking about taking my tail to Ghana or something and getting citizenship there, or anywhere else but here. I mean, we have a president who is like a 5-time felon, who openly admits to taking advantage of women. There's all type of nepotism happening in the government. Didn't Biden pardon his son or some craziness like that? Like, what are you talking about? This thing is a shit show. But that's also been our plight forever. So yeah, that's been my thought and my stance on it. I remember seeing what was it, Tabitha Brown talking about DEI and telling people don't boycott Target, who openly separated themselves from their DEI clauses because it's gonna hurt Black entrepreneurs, African entrepreneurs. To me, that was the dumbest freaking advice you could give. How about encouraging? The thing is,
that was crazy. I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, thing is, we don't give each other enough credit to organize ourselves. How about encouraging more Black people to just support and tell them how?
Exactly, that part.
I get it that Target is probably offering some sort of deal around mass production, but I know people that do it, and maybe the numbers won't be as great as you expected or that you would have been promised from a Target deal. So after what? We got to get out of the place of greed, and really start thinking more about sustainability in this country, in this quote unquote democracy that is not for us. And your question made me think about a quote from Malcolm X. Hold on, let me pull it. I had it up, and I got 1-year-old brain. And also, people should listen to Malcolm X's speech about democracy. Have you ever heard of it? Heard it, Bonita?
No, and I literally, as you said, that I wrote that down as something I'm going to immediately listen to after our
Malcolm X
discussion
has an
today.
extensive speech where he talks about democracy. He talks about, the Democratic Party being an illusion. So he says, I speak as a victim of America's so-called democracy. You and I have never seen democracy. All we've seen is hypocrisy. When we open our eyes today and look around America, we see America not through the eyes of someone who has enjoyed the fruits of Americanism. And so he has a whole, I want to say it's like an hour a week, and he talks about it. And I think what he said there holds true, if not more than ever today. We just got to listen. Yeah, so I'm complete with that.
Yeah, I mean, I thank you for sharing that, and I'm going to definitely go and read that myself or listen if I can find an audio of it online. But to many of the points that you raised and what you just commented, yeah, I mean, I think there are so many layers to it. Like you said, this system was not working for Black people before Trump got into office. Like, we know that. Whenever there is anything that, any kind of change, any kind of reform that happens, there's always some sort of loophole that will be built in that will still keep us from being able to truly benefit from any of the changes that are made. And we see that again and again and again and again. So I would never personally be angry or, feeling any kind of resentment towards any Black person who decided to not partake in any of these rallies. I would totally understand where they're coming from. I also support anyone who would show up to these rallies, because I, again, would totally understand where they're coming from. I think the main thing that I am happy to see is people taking some kind of stance or action and not just being completely complacent, whether they are choosing to, stand together with people on April 5th, or whether they are taking other actions, or whether they are engaging in radical self-care, like any kind of act of deep self-care. And I don't mean, like going out and spending money on spa day. I mean anything that they need to do to mentally and spiritually support themselves, whether that be, be in community, nurture community, spend time with elders, spend time with children, deepen their friendships, social connections. That is radical self-care. If they choose to engage in those types of things rather than stand outside, with signs all day long in protest, I think as long as people are doing something, to kind of bring about some sort of change, I'm happy to see it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm hoping that we use this opportunity as a time to rebuild community for ourselves. And so, for me, if I were to participate in something like that, it would never be for the cause, but instead to touch and agree with people that are activating, so that we could move more in the direction of sustainability. I think cooperative economics is most important in this current season. I think we need to dig deep into what we want family structures to look like in this season, figuring out how to support, the family structures that we have. Um, and I do agree, self-care is definitely a part of it too. Figuring out what that looks like in this time. I think I shared on the last Zoom, but right after the election, my daughter was in school and there were white kids running around calling the black kids niggers. And I remember I just
Yeah.
felt back to like the first time a white person called me a nigger, I was like 25 years old. And I cried in the middle of the street on 79th
Wow.
Street because I was so shocked that that happened. And I think that's when the bubble burst for me that, oh shoot, racism does exist. I always tell my my family that, they did us a disservice because we just didn't talk about racism. And it gave this false sense that it didn't exist anymore. And I think a lot of people are having that visceral response right now in all levels it's like an intergenerational response. It's almost like people woke up and realized, oh shoot, I'm black again. And so, but, and there
That
has
is interesting.
Yeah, that is. I mean, so many people. I watch so many people in this uproar because Kamala Harris didn't win.
I mean, yeah, I don't get the shock and surprise over her not winning. I honestly thought Trump was going to win last cycle, last election. So I was not surprised that he won for this one in the least. But that
Yeah,
said, going back to what you were talking about with your first experience with racism, like finding out racism existed, more so at 25 when somebody called you a nigger. I think I'm a little bit older. I say that tongue in cheek a little bit. I think I'm a lot older than both you and Dorian probably. But I grew up from very, very young. My first experience with racism, I was 3 years old, and it was persistent throughout my life. But I grew up in Massachusetts, and Massachusetts is extremely racist. So, they are considered a very liberal state. They are extremely racist, especially, no, I won't even say especially within the working class, because it's actually with the elite class in Massachusetts too, the educated, the Ivy League. Massachusetts is extremely racist in a very subversive way among the elites and in a very direct way among the working class. But anyway, so my experience with racism, started at a young age. I was very aware of it. And, so it was not shocking to me after 2020 when we had the Black Lives Matter movement and the backlash around that now there would be a massive pushback, an intensified pushback now that Trump is in office and he has made racism, sexism, misogyny, nepotism, all these things, these blatant, things okay to, be publicly. It's not surprising to me at all that there is a resurgence in brazen bigotry. So, and I actually think it's going to intensify. I think there are a lot of things, and I think it's driven a lot by social media. Social media is definitely, and mainstream media is definitely inciting, I think, an imminent, dare I say, an imminent race war, because they're fanning the flames of, I think they're fixating on certain narratives that are, for anyone who's tuned into mainstream media or social media, that is going to trigger people and get people activated in a way that could spill out into the real world in very disturbing ways. And that's something that's concerning to me. I don't know if you've heard recently about this case of one teen stabbing another teen. The teen who stabbed the other teen was Black. The one who was the victim was white. And mainstream media and social media is really kind of like driving up this particular incidents and making it very racially charged. And what I'm seeing online is very disturbing. And I think there's going to be more incidents like this that are going to be highlighted in media. And people are having very strong reactions to it, alongside the anti-immigrant propaganda that I'm seeing. I'm bracing myself for a lot more, I guess, vigilante action taking place. And that's frightening to me. And that, I feel like even saying that is kind of adding to the fear mongering. But I just feel it in the air that we're moving in the direction of more brazen actions that are going to be racially driven. I think there's more division happening now. And I'm wondering if there is a way, I think there is a way actually, that the division that is the schism that's happening or that's intensifying could actually, in terms of Black Americans specifically, how could we work that to our benefit? And we might have touched on this in our last conversation. When segregation was happening, when Black people had to shop at our own stores, for example, when we had to do things within our own communities, our businesses were doing well in a lot of ways. I won't say that there were barriers, of course, but Black people were supporting Black people because we had to. So if we are going more towards segregation and division, this is a moment in time for Black people specifically where we can start focusing on rebuilding community connection. And, what you just told me about Tabitha Brown, I didn't know that she had said those things. But this is a time where we should be strengthening our Black business networks. What is that website, Shop Black, for example, which is an online marketplace and a newsletter that highlights Black businesses, Black business owners. We can be really focusing on building infrastructures that support the expansion of Black, led businesses, Black ownership. We can start building out programs, educational programs that help people gain awareness about, land ownership, home ownership. I think this is an opportunity for us to turn this into a positive. And I'm, again, specifically speaking about Black people with this climate of, I think, open antagonism that I see is building. I'm wondering if you two see this happening, but I see it intensifying, and I see it intensifying very quickly. So
I have I just want to add on to this. First and foremost, I've been coming up with a list of places that were considered Black Wall Street when they existed, that were all places of financial growth and economic growth and independence that were violently torn down or systemically torn down by white supremacy, either by literal white supremacist activists or white supremacist policies made by elite class racists. But just to give some examples, there's probably the most famous or the most well-known, I should not use the word famous, but is Tulsa, Oklahoma, from the Greenwood district. That was from 1900s till 1921. In 1921, it's known as the Tulsa Race Massacre. It's where white mob Klan members burned the district, killed up to 300 Black residents, and destroyed 35 plus city blocks. There were no reparations paid. There was Jackson Ward in Richmond, Virginia, and that was from early 1800s till 1950. The specifically redlining, segregation, and the construction of Interstate 95 that was cut through the neighborhood. It displaced residents and businesses, causing economic collapse. There was Sweet Auburn, Atlanta, Georgia. This was early 1900s till 1960. What happened here? Jim Crow laws and urban renewal, as well as highway construction, which devastated businesses in the 1960s during the civil rights movement and caused devastation to community infrastructure. I'll just say one more, just to but I've got a whole list. But Bronzeville, Chicago, Illinois, really had economic organization around 1910, and that disintegrated in the 1950s. This happened due to redlining, discriminatory loans, and public housing projects that were intentionally then weakened, and then gentrification and neighborhood neglect and over policing became regular practice, devastating that community. Brownsville, Chicago, Illinois. Just another couple places. Auburn Avenue from Atlanta, Georgia. Haiti District, Durham, North Carolina. Treme, New Orleans, Louisiana. The Black Bottom and Paradise Valley from Detroit, Michigan. 2nd Street Corridor, Los Angeles, California. Boley, Oklahoma. These are all just examples uh, of the Black community coming together to form strong economic spaces, and either literal white supremacist activists come and destroy the place, or white supremacist elites put forward policies to disrupt and destroy the economic stability of these people, of the community. So just putting that out there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, every time we had tried to build and quote unquote pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, um, our efforts were definitely thwarted, put it lightly. But now I see that, more than ever, there are so many different ways that we can pour into ourselves and build up our economy. And since that is, since that seems to be what people want, hopefully, we can direct our efforts in this way. To me, that would be an amazing way to activate. That's the type of activism I'd love to see right now, is like building initiatives to support Black businesses, and strengthen our communities. So
Yeah, I love that idea. Um, and I think that'll push us more towards a place of sustainability.
one thing that's disturbing to me, though, is I'm seeing still a lot of Black influencers, and again, this is the social media sphere, and social media is so huge. It's extremely important to be a part of the conversation, how people are leveraging social media. But a lot of Black influencers are using their platforms and their large viewership and following to, push against that. Like, I'm seeing a lot of Black MAGA people, and that is how I'm curious. Like, how do we lessen the impact of that? One of the ways that I'm thinking about is, why aren't we creating our own social media platform? And I think there is someone that's trying to do that. I think George Foreman had a nephew. I hope I'm right about this. It may not be completely accurate, but I'm looking into it. Somebody told me about this. One of George Foreman's relatives, of course, at least, is trying to raise funds to build a social media platform that is, Black centered. And I mean, I think that we need a platform, for spreading messages that are, you know, positive and you know, reinforcing values that are about building community. Um, and I know that we have, you know, many Black media companies that already exist, and so we should be, you know, focusing our energy towards highlighting those outlets. Um, but I definitely think social media, because it is so accessible and global, is something that we need to lean into, building up and leveraging.
Yeah. I'm getting a
It
text
has to
from
be our own.
I'm getting a text from DeMarisa yet that her phone was at 1% and it just died. So she is not here anymore.
Oh,
Yeah.
to rock on that. Well, I will just
Yeah.
say this, you know,
Yes,
I'm
yes.
gonna look into that. Maybe you can put it in the notes, but I'll look into
Mhm.
the platform that I'm talking about and some of the Black media outlets that people
Yeah.
can probably tune into. But I think social media is something that the Black community in particular, but I think communities that are, you know, centered around organizing, I think we need to build our own platform, like literally for organizers, because we know that people that own the most popular social media platforms, Meta, you know, X, um, these companies are, and even Amazon, you know, um, we we know that they can censor the messages and close accounts and you know, mess with the algorithms. So I think it's imperative that we create our own platform. And I don't know if Blue Sky is it. You know, I
Yeah.
don't know. I haven't
Well,
gotten on that platform, but I think
Blue
we need
Sky
one
is
that is
literally
for.
founded by Jack Dorsey. Like it's literally the same person who started Twitter. So yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know enough about Dorsey, but I know that
Yeah.
you know, yeah, I don't know enough about Dorsey to speak on
Yeah.
how he would manage this. I know he sold Twitter to Elon, or to, you know, I know he gave up ownership of that platform, and I know what it's become since he gave up ownership, and
Yeah.
it's not good. So,
Yeah.
um, but in any case, I definitely am not championing Blue Sky. I didn't want to sign up for that platform. But I think it would be good for activists to create their own social media platform, and I think it would be good for Black people to create our own social media platform, so that we
Yeah.
can ensure our messages aren't being corrupted or you know, censored.
It's challenging. There's a couple of reasons it's challenging. Uh one is that the and I'm gonna freeform talk a little bit. Uh but the model of having like a CEO and having ownership and having just doing this capitalist model, it always turns bad. And one thing I try to think about is and I'm brain farting on his name, but the who's the gentleman who owns BET? He was I believe he was the first Black billionaire. Um, it's do you know his name, Bonita?
I thought it was a woman that was the first
There's it's
that
a
owned
woman too.
BET
It's
first. I thought it was a
her
woman.
husband, her husband. Um,
I
yeah,
don't know their names. I'll look them up. But
yeah. I can look it up in a moment, but it's that sort of piece where I don't trust that model because the only way you can survive that model is being like surviving within capitalism is being a capitalist, which means you're antisocial and you don't care about the, you know, all you care about is profit, and it's over the environment, it's over the results, it's over everything. Um so
it
there
it was Sheila Johnson. Sheila
Yeah.
Johnson, the woman who was
Yes. Yes.
the co-owner of BBC. But I hear what you're
Yeah.
saying, and that's also why I'm saying we need a platform.
Right.
It doesn't need to be run by a CEO, and there are other models. I mean, this is
Right.
why, okay, you know how I feel about blockchain. You know how I feel
Hmm.
about it. I do not think there is anything wrong with blockchain technology and utilizing it. Um, its decentralized potential. I think there are ways that we can create social media platforms that will be co-owned by, you know, multiple people, a decentralized platform run on the blockchain would be very powerful. So if people stopped and, being fixated on blockchain technology or, you know, um, cryptocurrency and DeFi, decentralized finance, and reshifted their focus on the utility for, truly decentralized social initiatives, um, that would be extremely powerful, an extremely powerful use of the technology.
So I found what I was speaking about. Robert L. Johnson. Um, he's an
Okay.
he's an American entrepreneur, media magnate, executive, philanthropist, and investor. He is the co-founder of BET, which was acquired by Viacom in 2001. I'm going to jump ahead just a little bit. Uh, he is the former owner of the Charlotte Bobcats, which are now the Charlotte Hornets. So he became the first Black billionaire in 2001. Johnson's companies have been counted among the most prominent Black American businesses in the late 20th and early 21st century. I'm going to jump down here. So to political activity. So 2008, Johnson was a prominent surrogate for Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. Um, he uh, where he lobbied representatives to lobby Obama to select Clinton as his running mate. Johnson attracted controversy over remarks made about Barack Obama, which whatever, that's fine. But I want to get to in 2016, following Donald Trump's victory in 2016 presidential election, Johnson met with then president-elect for a meeting at Trump International Golf Club. Johnson stated in a CNBC interview that he had known Trump personally for years and urged Black Americans to give Trump a chance. Johnson argued that Black voters should not be wedded to either party in the American two-party system, stating that overwhelming Black support for the Democratic Party means we are locked into one party, which undoubtedly limits and dilutes our voting power. In 2018, he stated that he declined any specific position in the Trump administration. In 2019, Johnson praised Trump's economic policies, which, by the way, that means the tax cuts that Trump did for millionaires, or sorry, millionaires and billionaires. But Johnson praised Trump's economic policies, stating that he gives the president a lot of credit for moving the economy in a positive direction that's benefiting large amount of Americans. He literally means billionaires. He argued that tax cuts implemented under Trump helped stimulate the economy and inspire confidence among business people. He stated that the Democratic Party moved too far to the left, the super far left Democratic Party that ran a far right border campaign uh, on immigration and speaks about, they completely supported genocide in the Middle East. But anyways, in September 2020, during the 2020 election, Johnson made comments that were interpreted as indicating a preference to Trump's reelection. However, CNBC noted that Johnson, when pressed, refused to outright endorse Trump. During the interview, he said, "Where I come out as a businessman, I will take the devil I know over the devil I don't know any time of the week." So sorry if that's a little off topic with what we were speaking about, and I know you're not speaking about um like a business or CEO like capitalist approach. um I just want to, because we're
Right.
recording this, I just want to really emphasize to people that the model of putting the capitalist model always leads to that. It always leads to
Yes.
support for the elite class and support for fascist movements. And you know, I think the only reason he stood for Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama was because that was I just think before there had been a person of black presentation in the White House. I think I just yeah, he still supported the most far right of the Democrats. That's all. That's what I'm trying to say. And then the moment there was a black person in the White House, he went all the way to the far right of it. So sorry about that. I just wanted to put that out there for listeners to kind of have an understanding of what we're not talking about. Cool. Sorry about that, Bonita.
Why are you saying sorry? Yeah, no need to say sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I jump on tangents.
Yeah.
That's what I'm apologizing for.
No, I don't think it's a tangent either. I mean, yeah, I think capitalism, you know, there are so many people in support of it, you know, free market capitalism, right? That's what they say. But I don't see how it ever, like you said, it it is dependent upon there being a pyramid, you know, there being people who are working for people that are in a superior position, people that are feeding in their energy, their labor into making the system work. And them always feeling, the people that are the workers, always feeling that at some point they are going to advance. But the thing is, even if they do break through and advance, it means they're doing so with the energy and lifeblood of someone that is positioned underneath them. I don't see any other examples of capitalism that employs any other kind of format. So I am in agreement with that. I don't know if you got a chance to listen to that video that I sent you the other day where, oh my gosh, what is his name? You know, that personal coach, Tony Robbins. I don't know if you got a chance to listen to that video where he was talking about capitalism and why it's important and kind of like bringing the spiritual component into it, which was hilarious to me. But if you get a chance, watch that, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it for another conversation to have. But
I already have
yeah,
opinions. Yeah, I already have opinions,
okay,
and I think
share.
I've heard that exact dialogue from about 15,000 other motivational speakers that are full of garbage. There might be some
Please speak
variations
on it.
to it,
Yes.
but yeah. I'll speak on it in a moment. You were bringing that up for a reason.
Well, yeah, because I think that continues to come up as a reason to support capitalism. Like that is the gaslighting that happens when people are pushing back against it. Then they find ways to basically, you know, say that this is progress, this is spiritual progress, this is the only thing that will advance our society, that will promote expansion for everyone and innovation. You know, capitalism supports innovation. It's the only model that supports innovation and expansion. The fact that they bring a spiritual component into it disgusts me.
All right, so I've got a very long thesis, if you're ready, to throw
Please
out there
bring it.
in response. Yeah, so the first and foremost part is so me individually, as well as other folks, are starting to stop viewing the world through the left-right paradigm, meaning that I can still say left-wing, I can still say right-wing, and I know what I'm talking about. I can say liberal, I can say socialist, I can say fascist. Like all of those terms, they make sense. They still apply in this model, but instead of thinking of it as a dichotomy of two different positions, think of it as a three-way fight. So the concept's called three-way fight. Three-way fight is that in the 19th century and throughout the 20th century, there were three social forces that took hold. There were many, many, many social forces out there, and many, many things exist within these large, big tent social forces. But the three social forces were neoliberal capitalism, revolutionary socialism, and reactionary chauvinism. And uh, these three social ideologies were enforced by root places, really metamorphosized in the United States, which was neoliberal, representing neoliberal capitalism. Nazi Germany, which really represented reactionary chauvinism, and the USSR, or the Soviet Union, which really represented revolutionary socialism. So that's just to give some insight into how I view politics when I'm thinking about things. So to me, there is a big perspective on if somebody is protesting through a revolutionary socialist perspective versus a neoliberal capitalist perspective, or if somebody's being involved in that way. So that's the first point I want to put out. The second point is this concept called capitalist realism. I forget who actually coined the term, but the really, really well kind of crafted argument on what capitalist realism is came in Mark Fisher's book, which is called Capitalist Realism. And I'm going to do my best to summarize the concept of it. But basically, his argument is that after the fall of the USSR, there was now no longer a boogeyman in Western or pro-capitalist, pro-neoliberal media and politics. There was now no longer a boogeyman, no longer the enemy, the scary communist enemy, and so we now have this concept, and it's a Marxist concept called false consciousness, which is the concept where your perceived reality is incorrect for reasons that have almost been you've been socially pressured into. An example that I give is Elton John in 2012 was against same-sex marriage. Because he was like, well, I just, marriage is a religious thing and, not a state thing. And then after marriage equality became federalized, he literally got married to his partner of many, many years and responded with, I don't know what I was thinking at the time. It made no sense. So that's an example of what I
Wow.
use. Yeah, that's an example of what I use for false consciousness. People will have this opinion that when time passes, they go, what? Why did I have that opinion? Like, and it's just because of sort of the social norms. And so,
Right.
anyways, capitalist realism is the concept that capitalism is just what things are. Like, you have to get a job, you have to go to work, you are a smart businessman, smart business person. Look at
Man is correct, right?
yes. Well, and look at feminism through that view, or look at Black liberation through that view, and how nonsense it ends up coming out. Like, if it's the like we need more female CEOs. It's like, no, we don't. Like, we don't need any more CEOs. Uh, like it's taking just an argument that doesn't exist, and then it's making it seem like it is the reality. So in Mark Fisher's book, one of the arguments he says is there are three places where capitalist realism has extremely large cracks, where the sort of veneer of this is just how it is. I mean, even and it's a bummer DeMarisa's off right this moment, but a lot of the folks we work with who are, very ghetto, very like lumpen proletariat or underclass folks, not working class, gentry class, or middle class. But a lot of those folks, there's this stereotype of a dream of the way to get out is either through music, like being a rapper, or through sports, like being a basketball player. And it's like that's such a capitalist way of viewing success, and the concept that we have a ghetto, or we have any colonized or neo-colonized people, it are results of capitalism. And so it's just a very absurd circular logic that capitalist realism creates, where uh you capitalism is causing your problems, but capitalism will be the solution for your problems. And this gets complicated, because this isn't saying that if you have financial success in capitalism that you won't have a better life. That's not saying that, because that could literally happen. But um I told you this is a rant. So the third piece of this is the cracks that Mark Fisher points out, um are uh the environment. So the capitalism cannot fix what it's causing to the world, which is climate change. And it is less profitable to be more green. Marx himself spoke that capitalism was a step forward in human progress from feudalism and monarchy. And like capitalism's greatest achievement as a system was the concept of like mass production, meaning that you can actually make things for everybody. But it still followed the monarchist worldview, and it tried to, it plays this like liberal democracy piece, but it's really about like, look at these successful CEOs who are just so like how often do you hear the argument that the United States should be run like a business, or like it's like, you what the fuck, like you want somebody who can just fire you for deciding that they don't need you anymore. Yeah, and your worth is only based on your promotion or demotion, or what your wage is. And yes, yeah, you exactly. And so oh yeah, I keep saying the three cracks and then not actually saying them. So the big crack is the environment. Like capitalism cannot change what it is doing to the environment. We are experiencing climate change. We have had less snow every year here in New York as a result of climate change. Um, so that's the first crack. The second crack is mental health. So I find this very, very interesting, and we could talk for literally centuries on this. But mental health is an experience that, of course, is a biological process. We do process things differently, but we we have mental health that is exacerbated by the structure of capitalism. And I've got a couple of examples to use for that. Um, one one big example of mental health being exacerbated in capitalism is any form of schizoid or paranoia or delusional type of processing. So people who might be their brain chemistry is off, or different, and so they're seeing things that nobody else is seeing. And some of it can be devastating. It can be horrifying, because they can. I've heard a schizophrenic person describe their life as getting used to things being a horror movie, and you just telling yourself it's not there, or it's not real, and it's okay. Now, that is all like important to know about schizophrenia, that those examples exist. But there's a piece of it where schizophrenic people used to be considered oftentimes some sort of wise person, or like the archetype of the Joker, or like the jester that we have in sort of human consciousness. There's an argument to be made that some people in our human history who were experiencing and seeing things differently, um, were actually helping everybody else understand their place better. Now we've got a structure of capitalism which is oriented around you have to have a job. And if you are schizophrenic, you cannot function in a job. So capitalism, if you do not function within capitalism, we incarcerate you. That's a big message that I want to get
Yep.
across. If you are not able to function in capitalism, we incarcerate you. There's an example that I love to use on classism and what we experience. So the pygmy people. Now I am generalizing, and I've never worked with any pygmy people in my personal life, so there are things I will absolutely be getting wrong. But I just want to give this as a concept for people to understand. Homelessness or houselessness is a creation of capitalism. Some people, when they are homeless, they develop schizoid mental health issues, because when you are all of a sudden on your own,
On your
you
own. Yep.
you have no access to food. You or actually, it's very weird because you actually have a lot of access to food, but it's always like food. There's a dehumanizing quality of you're always given food. There's an interesting thing that I've learned from homeless and houseless activists, that there are actually a lot of people on the street giving food out all the time, and it's like very common to come up and offer somebody a sandwich, and they've got like 5 sandwiches on them from other people. So that is actually a testament, I think, and an argument on how human beings really do care about each other, and mutual aid is just as much of a part of our evolution as competition is. And in fact, I make the argument that
Well, I mean, that's what made us human, right? Like
yes,
the scientists a while back found a bone that had been basically mended, and that was like an indication of
yes,
our civilization, our civilization, our human connection evolving, because we took care of each other to make sure the person
yes,
survived whatever that caused that break.
yeah. And so I think that to bring this back to the point of the discussion about um Black people not participating or participating at these protests and what these protests mean. Um, the thing I would like to add before passing it back to you, Bonita, is that I think there is some serious erasure going on uh, that happens when elderly are in leadership positions. Our culture,
Yeah,
our media culture, our political culture does not respect elders. Um, we have
100%.
also,
I agree.
yeah, we have also made a setup where our elders are actually in ignorant positions, and can actually be leading people in sort of like damaging ways. We also know about that, but that's a systemic issue. But the other piece is that oh, sorry, one more piece. I remember one of the most racist things I heard during the George Floyd protest was I saw somebody on social media. Somebody said somebody said something about the cops were called, and somebody responded with, "I don't think Black people call the cops," and it was like, what? Like,
Oh my
and it
goodness.
was just this person just completely othered Black people as if they're all one type of person who's socially aware. And it just was like it was like there are Black police, there are there like people call the cops if something happens, like that happens. but there was just something so racist and othering about it that just it really grossed me out, because it was like, you think you're on the good side, you literally think that, and yet you look at an entire half of the world as just one lump of one thing that you think it is. And I just found it really gross. But so there's a part that I'm very bothered, just in the same way, about the way it's being presented, about Black people not participating. Now on my
Yeah.
second point, is, it's like, through the neoliberal and the revolutionary like perspective, this is a neoliberal protest to me. Like, it's like, yeah, Trump is awful. Like, we all literally like know Trump
No, it is.
is a
Yes.
danger. Like it's like, no shit. Um, and I appreciate people getting out on the street. Me personally, it's like, yeah, that's something, but it's not really addressing the fact that we have a system that allows billionaires to just have that power and that money and that narcissism. um and the third piece of it is that it is not, this is a racist issue, and I think that we can talk about this more in depth, but there's if you look at social class and what racism and white supremacy is, I do think there's a difference with working class white supremacy, lumpen proletariat white supremacy, gentry and like intellectual class white supremacy, and then elite class
Yes,
white supremacy,
absolutely.
which is that's the shit we're seeing with Donald Trump and Elon Musk and Mark Andreessen and Mark Zuckerberg. There's a certain type of white supremacy that they subscribe to that I find much more sinister than the other forms of it. And I don't want to sound like I'm excusing any act of white supremacy or excusing anything in the name of or due to white supremacy, but just based on interactions and engagement with a lot of different humans, I do think that the people at the top 0.001%, their version of white supremacy, that is why we had Adolf Hitler. That is why we had apartheid. That is why we had the Spanish Inquisition. That is why we are currently having Palestine and Israel. That is currently why we're attacking brown Spanish speaking, actually non-English speaking immigrants. Um, I have this will be my last point, Bonita. A person who I worked with in music therapy recently, um, I love this job because you meet people from different social times and different perspectives, and you really meet just people where they're at. I had an Irish person, I'll leave it very vague, but they were old enough they were speaking about experiencing actual direct oppression, like Irish oppression. They weren't allowed to own property, they weren't allowed to enter certain spaces. Like, this was this person's life for the first 15 years or so. Um, and it was just really interesting hearing
Where
them.
was this happening? Did they say what state? I'm just curious.
Brooklyn,
Where
New
is
York.
the experience?
Yeah, they
Okay.
were Irish immigrants and parents in the 1910s, and this person was born in the 1920s. This was their experience in the 1920s and 30s. Um, and it was just really interesting because it was like, it was that, but then this person also described witnessing many of their community members turn extremely racist once they had a different sort of power position in the
Access.
culture.
Yeah. Once they
Yes,
have access. Yep.
but the thing that I found just so interesting about it was, we have been talking about this like, and I've sort of been thought experimenting it for a long time, and it was wild to hear somebody who was like actually from it, and it was like, right, right, these are actual human stories. This is important to know, um these intersections. But yeah, I'll pass it to you, Bonita. Those are my thoughts.
Well, that's a good segue to another conversation of the nuances of, cultural identity and racial capitalism and how it impacts people of different demographics. I think that should be another conversation that we get into. But I know that we have been talking for 90 minutes. And I do have another meeting myself, but I will just end with this. I think that there is definitely opportunity right now for us to lean into community building. I think that it is important for us to make sure that other narratives, other stories, I should say, are getting focused, um, because we know that this kind of like any kind of dominant narrative, you need to like just do a little bit of a deeper dive to see what other stories exist, because usually, I mean, all the time, I would say 100% of the time, there is another story that's not being told when we are hearing whatever the dominant narrative is. So I invite people to be curious and do their own research, to find out what the other stories are before believing whatever the dominant narrative is. And that narrative that Black people were not supporting or out there rallying, perhaps is not 100% true. So bringing it back to our original topic of discussion. And yeah, I think that think social media is a really big thing that I would like to talk about,
Yeah.
in another conversation. How can we leverage that in a way that can have a positive impact on any kind of movement, because it is probably the most powerful tool for reaching at least the younger generation, Gen Z and Gen Alpha for sure. And in terms of multi-generational impact, one thing I would like to do is, and I think I told you this before, I would really love to organize forums, conversations, places where we can gather people of multiple generations together to talk about all of these issues that are, of, prominent in our consciousness at this moment in time. I think it's important to facilitate those kinds of conversations, and do whatever we can, whether it's holding salons, whether it's organizing, larger forums for this to happen. But I think encouraging multi-generational, intergenerational conversation at this time is important, because the older voices especially are not being heard enough, and there's so much wisdom to be sourced because they've lived through so much
There's
change.
there's a very interesting thing that I keep realizing this. There is a deep ageism conflict right now in the what I would call the white community. I think I mentioned to you about realizing I have some serious ageism towards baby boomers that I'm working through. Um, and
Yeah, there
I've
is. I see it
well,
too.
and yeah, and I've noticed, however, specifically speaking to you, speaking to DeMarisa, speaking to coworkers in various places, I have noticed that this is not the same dialogue happening in Black communities. However, it does happen in Asian communities, which or Asian bodied communities. And I've just it's something I've noticed that I'm very curious to explore what that is, because I think that ageism is a very problematic uh issue on making any kind of conversation successful, or any kind of community experiencing successful, because just the issue I've seen within the white community is not knowing how to there is such an amount of pressure that seems to be um needing to be proven right or being correct, that there can't be more complicated dialogues that challenge that narrative. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to have a conversation, one of our conversations with someone from older generations. It would be great to get a person from a boomer generation, you know, and the silent generation is one that's often forgotten. So it would be great to get someone on from that generation too in one of these conversations that we have.
Yeah. Yeah, and so with
Thank you so much.
Yeah, with that, again, this is This Machine Kills Fascists on Dorian's Mode. We're having conversations for the next couple of weeks with various activists, scholars, thinkers, people on the street, people in the system. My name is Dorian Wallace. Thank you so much.